By the time Elias Boone understood they meant to kill him, the sun was already sinking behind the western wall of Mercy Canyon. His horse was gone, his canteen was gone, and the last sound he heard from the three riders was their laughter fading into the red dust above him. Before we ride deeper into this story, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from and what time is it there? And if you enjoy survival stories, old Wild West stories, and forgotten shelter tales, don't forget to subscribe to Frontier Shelter. Elias Boone was not a famous man, and if you had passed him on a trail in the summer of 1884, you would not have looked twice. He was 36 years old, lean from hunger and work, with a brown beard, tired eyes, and shoulders shaped by years of lifting fence rails, saddles, feed sacks, and grief. He had once owned a small ranch near the Salt River, where the grass grew thin but good enough, and where his wife, Anna, planted wildflowers beside the cabin door, even though the goats kept eating them. Then fever came through the valley in the wet season. Anna was gone before the doctor arrived. A year later, debt took the land. A winter flood took the barn. By spring, all Elias had left was a cracked rifle, a bedroll, a few dollars wrapped in cloth, and an old gray mare named Mercy. Mercy was not a beautiful horse. One eye had gone cloudy white years before. Her left ear was torn from a fence accident, and her walk had a small, uneven hitch when the road was cold. But she was steady, and in the West, steady was better than pretty. Elias had owned faster horses. He had ridden stronger horses, but Mercy was the one who waited when he fell, found shade when he was careless, and woke him with a shove of her nose when coyotes came too close to camp. She had carried him after Anna died, when he rode for days with no purpose except not being inside the cabin where her chair still sat by the stove. So when a letter came from his younger sister Ruth in a settlement beyond the San Mateo Range, saying her husband was dead and she needed help before winter, Elias sold what little he could, packed Mercy, and rode west. 12 days into that journey, he reached a trading post called Bitter Creek, which was not a town so much as a few tired buildings trying not to fall over. There was a store, a blacksmith shed, a stable, a well with a cracked stone lip, and a porch where men sat because they had nowhere better to be. Elias planned to buy flour, coffee, and oats, then leave before noon. But Bitter Creek had shadows of its own, and 3 of them were sitting beside the stable when he arrived. The first was a broad man in a red scarf, with clean boots and a smile that looked practiced. His name was Cole Varn, and Elias heard it before he spoke to him. The storekeeper said it softly to another man, the way decent people speak the name of a snake they do not want to wake. The second rider was thin, sharp-faced, and dressed in black, with 2 pistols hanging low at his hips. The third was younger, maybe 19, with nervous hands and a bruise under one eye that he kept touching without knowing it. Elias bought what he needed, filled his canteen, and was tying a small sack of oats behind the saddle when Cole Varn stepped into the sunlight and looked Mercy over like she was already his. "That gray mare yours?" he asked. Elias pulled the saddle strap tight. "She is." Cole walked around the horse slowly. Mercy turned her good eye toward him and flattened her torn ear. "Ugly thing," Cole said. "She gets where she's going," Elias replied. The thin rider laughed from the shade. "Man talks like the horse can hear him." Elias did not look at him. "She can." Cole smiled. "I'll give you $10 for her." "She isn't for sale." 12. "No." Cole leaned one arm over Mercy's neck, and the mare shifted away from him. 15, then. That's kindness for a horse with one eye. Elias finally looked at him. Kindness would be leaving her alone. The porch went quiet. The storekeeper stopped sweeping dust from the doorway. The stable boy froze with one hand on a bucket. Cole's smile remained, but his eyes changed. They became flat and cold. "That's a dangerous way to answer a friendly offer," he said. Elias tied off the rope. "I've heard worse from better men." For a moment, the trading post held its breath. Then Cole laughed, loud and easy, as though they had shared a joke. He slapped Elias on the shoulder hard enough to make a point, then stepped back. "Ride careful, friend," he said. Elias knew then that he should have taken the longer northern road. But food was low, Ruth's letter was heavy in his pocket, and the map showed that Mercy Canyon would save nearly a day. Men on the frontier often survived by trusting what they could see and ignoring what they felt. Elias felt danger in Bitter Creek, but he could see the road west, so he took it. By late afternoon, the land had changed from open scrub to broken red stone. Mercy Canyon opened before him like a wound in the earth. Its walls rose high and narrow, glowing in the low sun, with ledges and cracks that made the rocks look like old ruined towers. The trail dipped between them and followed a dry wash deeper into the canyon. It was beautiful in the way dangerous things are beautiful from a distance. Elias had heard stories about that place. Some said flash floods came through it without warning, born from storms that fell miles away. Some said outlaws used the side passages to hide stolen cattle. Some said travelers vanished there because the canyon had too many shadows and not enough mercy, despite its name. Elias touched Mercy's neck. "Just through and out," he whispered. The horse snorted, not agreeing, but moving anyway. For the first hour, the trail was quiet. A hawk circled high above. Lizards slipped between stones. The walls held the day's heat, and every sound came back twice. Then Mercy stopped. Her torn ear lifted. Elias heard it too, hooves behind them. He turned in the saddle and saw the 3 riders from Bitter Creek blocking the trail. Cole Varn sat in the middle, red scarf bright against the dust. The thin rider moved left. The young one moved right. They did not hurry. They had done this before. Elias rested his hand near his rifle. "Road's wide enough," he called. Cole shook his head. "Not today." Mercy shifted beneath Elias. "I don't want trouble." "Then you should have sold me the horse." Elias said nothing, because there are moments when words only give a man more ways to die. The thin rider drew first. Elias never reached his rifle. A shot cracked against the canyon wall. Mercy reared, and the young rider came in fast from the side. Elias felt a blow across his face. Then the ground hit him hard enough to drive the air from his lungs. Dust filled his mouth. The sky spun. When his sight cleared, Cole had Mercy's reins. The old mare fought him, pulling back, hooves scraping stone, cloudy eye wide and furious. Elias tried to rise, but the thin rider kicked him under the ribs and pain opened inside him like fire. "Stay down," the man said. Cole calmly removed Elias's canteen, rifle, food sack, and coat from the saddle. He threw the bedroll into the dust as if it had no value, but kept the rifle and canteen. Elias spat blood. "She'll throw you." Cole leaned down from the saddle. "Then I'll teach her not to." Mercy screamed once as Cole turned her toward the trail. It was not a human sound, but it broke something human in Elias. The young rider looked back at him. There was shame in the boy's face, quick and frightened. Cole saw it. "Nathan," he said, "don't go soft now." The boy looked away. The 3 riders climbed the trail and disappeared above the next bend, their laughter bouncing off the stone until it faded into nothing. Elias lay there until the sun touched the rim of the canyon. He did not know how long he had been still. His lip had split. His side ached with every breath. His throat was already dry, and the knowledge that they had taken the canteen was worse than the pain. A man can go hungry and still think. Thirst turns thought into sand. He sat up slowly and looked at what remained. One dusty bedroll, a small tin cup, a strip of rawhide, a sewing needle, 3 matches in a paper twist, and half a hard biscuit smashed into crumbs. He ate the biscuit carefully, even licking the dust from his fingers. Then he wrapped the rawhide around his left hand, found a broken branch for a walking stick, and stood. He had 2 choices, wait and die, or move and perhaps die somewhere else. Elias had buried too much of his life to surrender to the first option. He walked west, deeper into Mercy Canyon because the way back was uphill and the way forward, at least, still pretended to be a road. The shadows lengthened, the red walls grew purple. Heat left the stone quickly, and the desert cold came in like a thief. By nightfall, Elias had found no water and no climbable path. He wrapped himself in the bedroll and leaned against a canyon wall, shivering under a sky that showed only a thin strip of stars. Sleep came in broken pieces. In one dream, Anna stood beside the river at their old ranch, wearing the blue dress she saved for Sundays. "You always were stubborn," she said. Elias told her, "I lost the horse." She looked at him with the sad patience she had used when he blamed himself for things no man could change. "Then find your feet." He woke before dawn with his teeth clenched and his fingers numb. The dream stayed with him as he stood. Find your feet. So he did. Morning light slid down the canyon slowly, first touching the high ledges, then the broken shelves, then the sand below. Elias searched every shadow for moisture. He knew canyons sometimes hid water under stone, in roots and damp sand where the rock held coolness through the day. Hours passed. His tongue swelled. His side throbbed. More than once he thought he heard Mercy's hooves, but it was only loose pebbles falling from the walls. Near mid-morning he found the first sign that he was not alone. Footprints, small ones, barefoot, or wrapped in cloth so thin they left almost no edge. They crossed a patch of damp sand near the base of a rock wall. Damp sand. Elias dropped to his knees and dug with both hands. The hole filled slowly, one dark spoonful at a time. He pressed his lips to it and sucked water through grit. It was bitter, warm, and muddy, but it was water, and in that moment it tasted like mercy itself. He drank too much and nearly sickened himself. Then he sat back, breathing hard, and studied the footprints. They were not old, a child maybe, or a small woman. No one traveled barefoot in a canyon like this unless they had no choice. Elias followed them. They appeared and vanished over rock, bending along shaded places, moving where the sand was soft. Whoever had made them was weak, but clever. Near a thorn bush, he found a scrap of yellow cloth caught on a branch. It was recently torn. He folded it and placed it in his pocket. Cole Varn had left him in Mercy Canyon because he believed the canyon was empty. But the footprints said otherwise. Near noon, Elias heard crying. At first he thought it was wind moving through a crack. Then it came again, thin and broken, a child trying not to be heard and failing. Elias moved around a bend and found a wider bowl in the canyon, where fallen stones made a maze of shadow. Beneath a slanted rock shelf, a girl curled against the wall. She was perhaps 11 years old, with black tangled hair, a torn yellow dress, and feet wrapped in strips of cloth darkened with blood. She held a rusted kitchen knife in both hands. When Elias stepped into view, she raised it. "Stay back!" Her voice shook, but her eyes did not. Elias stopped at once and lifted his hands. "I won't hurt you." That's what men say before they do. He slowly sat on a stone so he would not tower over her. "My name is Elias Boone. 3 riders stole my horse and left me here." The girl watched him closely. One had a red scarf. Elias felt his stomach tighten. "Yes, Cole Varn," she whispered. The name sounded older in her mouth than it should have. "You know him?" Her fingers tightened around the knife. "He took my father." Elias looked at her torn feet, her hollow cheeks, the way she kept her back to the stone so no one could come behind her. "What's your name?" "Lucy Vale." Elias knew the name. At Bitter Creek, the storekeeper had mentioned the Vale place, a ranch east of the post that had been robbed 2 nights before. He had said it with a shake of his head, the way people speak about tragedy when it is close enough to fear but not close enough to help. "Your family had the ranch by the cottonwoods?" Elias said. Lucy's mouth trembled. "They came after supper. Pa told Ma to hide me in the wash shed. I saw through the boards Cole hit him. The others took the horses. Ma ran for the rifle." She stopped. Elias did not ask her to continue. Some memories should not be dragged into daylight before they are ready. "Your father?" he asked softly. "They made him ride with them. He was alive when they left, and you ran into the canyon." She nodded. "Pa said there was water here if you knew where to look. I thought I could follow them. Then I got lost." "How long have you been here?" 2 days. Maybe 3. Elias looked toward the slanted rock shelf above her. Behind it, a narrow crack opened into darkness. "What's back there?" Lucy glanced at it. "I don't know. I heard something move inside." Elias picked up a small stone and tossed it in. It bounced once, then fell farther than expected. Cool air breathed from the crack. Not wind from above, air from space. He crawled closer, then eased through. The opening widened into a small hidden chamber behind the canyon wall. Light entered through a crack high overhead. On the floor sat a ring of blackened stones, an old dry gourd, a torn blanket stiff with dust, broken clay and bones from rabbits or birds. Scratches covered one wall in groups of 5. Tallies, Someone had once counted days here, many days. Elias touched the marks and felt the strange company of the dead or gone. The canyon had hidden other people before them. Some had suffered. Some had survived. He brought the gourd and blanket back to Lucy. "It's a shelter," he said. "Cooler than out here." She looked at the dark crack with distrust, then back at the sun. Heat made the choice for her. Elias helped her inside, keeping his movements slow. She did not trust him, and he respected that. Trust was expensive on the frontier, and children often paid more than adults. Inside the chamber, he cleaned her feet with a little muddy water from the seep. The cuts were ugly, full of grit, but not yet lost to infection. Lucy bit her sleeve and refused to cry. "You're tough," Elias said. "My PA says crying wastes salt. Your pa sounds like a practical man." Her eyes flashed. "He is." Elias nodded. "Is." They rested through the worst of the afternoon. Elias chewed mesquite pods and gave Lucy the softest pieces. He studied the old chamber, the tallies, the gourd, the dry air, the angle of the light. A shelter like this could keep a person alive, but not forever. They needed real water, food, and a way out. Near sunset, Elias climbed a pile of rocks outside the chamber and looked deeper into the canyon. At first he saw only red walls and shadow. Then, far west, a thin thread of smoke rose between cottonwood branches. A horse whinnied. Low, irritated, familiar. Mercy. The sound moved through Elias with such force that for a moment he forgot he was hurt. He climbed down and returned to Lucy. "They're close," he whispered. Her face went pale. "My father?" "Maybe. I'm going." "You can barely walk." "I heard their camp last night. I know the way." Elias wanted to say no. He wanted to leave her hidden and safe. But safe was a thin word in a canyon full of armed men. Lucy knew things he did not, and her father might not have much time. "You do exactly what I say," he told her. She nodded. "Unless you say something foolish." Despite everything, Elias almost smiled. They waited until darkness settled. The moon was thin, which helped them. They moved from shadow to shadow, Elias carrying Lucy when the stones became too sharp, Lucy pointing the way when the canyon split. Soon they smelled smoke, then horses, then coffee. Cole Varn's camp sat in a bend where cottonwood trees grew from a hidden spring. 4 horses were tied there, including Mercy. The old gray mare stood with her head high and her torn ear flat, plainly insulted by her new company. Near the fire, Cole sat with Elias's rifle across his knees. The thin outlaw drank from a tin cup. Nathan, the young rider, stood guard, but looked more frightened than watchful. Behind them, tied to a dead tree, was a man with gray hair and a swollen face. Lucy inhaled sharply. "Pa." Elias put a finger to his lips and drew her back. Daniel Vale was alive, but Cole had 3 guns, horses, and the camp. Elias had a rusted knife, a hurt rib, and a child with torn feet. A fair fight would be suicide, so they needed an unfair one. Elias looked up at the wall above the camp. A slope of loose stone sat there, balanced like broken dishes on a shelf. A hard push might send it down. It might not kill anyone, and Elias did not want to kill if he could avoid it. But it would scatter horses and men. It would create fear. In the dark, fear could be a weapon, he told Lucy the plan. She listened, then said, "That sounds foolish." "It is." "Good," she said. "Cole won't expect it." They climbed the side of the canyon in silence. Elias's ribs burned with each pull. Lucy crawled beside him, jaw clenched, hands bleeding again. Below, the fire glowed orange. Cole laughed at something the thin rider said. Daniel Vale hung motionless against the tree. At the top of the slope, Elias braced his shoulder against the largest loose stone and pushed. Nothing. He pushed again, and pain flashed white through his chest. Lucy put both hands beside his and pushed too. The stone shifted, then another shifted, then the whole slope gave way. Rocks crashed down into the camp. Horses screamed. Men shouted. Dust swallowed the fire. Nathan fired wildly into the dark. The thin outlaw ran straight behind Mercy, and Mercy, who had opinions about rude men, kicked him hard enough to fold him into the dirt. Elias slid down the slope, half falling, half running. Cole was trying to calm the horses with one hand and raise Elias's rifle with the other. Elias hit him from the side. Both men went down. Cole was heavier and stronger, and he drove a fist into Elias's ribs. Elias nearly blacked out. Cole reached for his pistol. Then Lucy appeared behind him and struck his wrist with a rock. The pistol fell. Cole roared and turned toward her. That was enough. Elias grabbed the fallen gun and pressed it against Cole's chest. "Stop." Cole froze. The smile was gone. Nathan stood near the fire with his rifle shaking. He could have shot Elias. He did not. "Put it down," Elias said. Nathan looked at Cole, then at Daniel tied to the tree, then at Lucy, who was already limping toward her father. Slowly, the young man lowered the rifle. "I didn't kill nobody," he whispered. "Then don't start now," Elias answered. Lucy cut Daniel free with her rusted knife. He collapsed into her arms as much as a beaten man could. "Lucille?" he murmured, as though afraid she was a dream. "I'm here, Pa." Elias tied Cole and the thin rider with their own rope. Rusk, the thin outlaw, cursed and spat blood, but Mercy watched him with such cold satisfaction that he stopped moving too much. Elias took back his rifle, his canteen, and his horse. When he reached Mercy, the old mare pressed her head into his chest. Elias rested his forehead against her neck. "You ugly old angel," he whispered. Mercy snorted as if insulted. They could not stay at the camp. Cole had friends, and outlaws often had more loyalty to stolen money than to each other. Daniel Vale knew of an old line camp built into the south wall, a shelter used by cattlemen before the trails shifted north. He was weak, but he could guide them. They loaded food, canteens, blankets, and rifles. Lucy rode Mercy. Daniel rode a stolen ranch horse. Nathan walked with his hands tied in front of him, watched by Elias. Cole and Rusk were left tied at the camp, alive but furious. Elias did not like leaving enemies behind him, but he liked killing men even less. They reached the line camp at dawn. It was nearly invisible until they stood before it, a low stone wall tucked beneath an overhang, a rough wooden door brushed with desert branches, and a pocket of cottonwood trees nearby where the horses could hide. Inside were 2 bunks, a cold hearth, an empty barrel, and a narrow crack in the back wall where cool air moved. A shelter. Not comfortable, not pretty, but alive. Daniel collapsed onto a bunk. Lucy fell asleep sitting upright, one hand still holding the knife. Nathan sat in a corner and stared at his tied hands. Elias stood guard at the door until the sun rose high enough to burn the canyon gold. For one day they rested. Daniel told the rest of his story in pieces. Cole had been using Mercy Canyon for months. He robbed travelers, small ranches, lone wagons, anyone too weak to bring a posse after him. He knew hidden springs and side trails. When people disappeared in the canyon, their deaths were blamed on heat, floods, snakes, or foolishness. "My wife tried to stop them," Daniel said, and his voice broke there. Lucy climbed beside him on the bunk and held his hand. Elias looked away. The frontier taught men to speak plainly of death, but plain words did not make it smaller. Near sunset, Nathan finally spoke. "I never wanted to ride with Cole." Daniel looked at him with tired hatred. "But you did." The boy nodded. "My brother owed him money." Cole said I could work it off. Then he said if I left, he'd kill him. "So you stood there while he killed my wife." Nathan's face crumpled. "I didn't shoot her." Daniel's voice dropped. "But you stood there." No one spoke after that. Elias studied Nathan and saw something he did not want to see. Not innocence, but weakness. The West was full of young men who stepped onto the wrong road because the right one was hungry, lonely, and hard. But wrong roads still had bodies on them, and a reason was not the same as forgiveness. Before dawn the next morning, Mercy woke them. She stamped once outside, then again. Elias opened his eyes and grabbed the rifle. The canyon was blue with early light. Hooves approached. More than one. Daniel tried to stand and nearly fell. Lucy reached for the knife. Nathan went pale. "How many?" Daniel whispered. Elias listened. 4, maybe 5. Cole's friends had come. The line camp had one door, one small window, and no easy way out. A poor place to defend, a worse place to be trapped. Then Elias remembered the crack in the back wall. Cool air moved through it, and air meant space. Space sometimes meant a passage. He shoved aside a loose board and held the lantern near the crack. It was narrow, too narrow for Daniel, maybe wide enough for Lucy and Nathan. "Where does it go?" Lucy asked. "Only one way to learn," Elias said. Lucy crawled first because she was smallest. Nathan followed because fear had made him useful. Daniel gripped the rifle and faced the door. Elias stood beside the window with Cole's pistol. Outside, the riders arrived. One of them shouted Cole's name. Another laughed when he saw the line camp. "Come on out." Daniel's jaw tightened. A man outside called, "Send out the girl and the horses, and maybe we leave you breathing." Daniel's face changed at the word girl. He looked less like a beaten rancher and more like a father who had already buried too much. "Not today," he whispered. The first shot came through the door, splintering wood. Daniel fired back. A man outside cried out. Then the canyon exploded with gunfire. Smoke filled the line camp. Elias fired through the window, saw a rider duck behind a boulder, fired again and heard the empty click of a chamber. The door shook under a heavy kick. Then Lucy's voice echoed from behind the wall. "It opens!" Elias turned. Her face appeared through the crack, dirty and bright with urgency. "There's a wash behind here. It leads up." "Can Daniel pass?" Lucy hesitated, and that pause answered before her words did. "No." Daniel heard her. For a moment, the truth sat among them like a stone. Then Daniel grabbed Elias's sleeve. "Take my girl?" "No." "Take my girl." Lucy screamed from the crack. "Pa! No!" Daniel closed his eyes as if the sound hurt more than his injuries. "Lucille Vale, you listen. You go with Mr. Boone. No, you live. That's your job now." Elias looked at Daniel, then at the crack, then at the fractured stone around it. Anna's voice moved through his memory. "You always were stubborn." He grabbed an old pickaxe from the corner. The handle was cracked, but the iron head was solid. "Move back," he said. Daniel stared. "What are you doing?" "Finding my feet." Elias swung the pick into the wall beside the crack. Stone chipped. Pain tore through his ribs. He swung again. Daniel understood and grabbed an iron bar from the hearth. Together they attacked the wall while bullets tore through the door. Lucy pulled loose stones from the other side. Nathan helped her, shouting, "Faster!" The door split. A man's arm reached through. Daniel fired once, and the arm vanished. Elias swung again. The pick handle snapped. He dropped it and tore at the stones with both hands until his fingers bled. The opening widened inch by inch. Daniel forced one shoulder through, then the other, groaning as the rock scraped his injuries. Lucy pulled from the other side. Nathan braced his feet and helped. At last Daniel fell through into the hidden wash. Elias followed last, boots kicking dust as the front door burst open behind him. The passage was not a tunnel but a dry cut between slabs of red stone. It climbed sharply behind the line camp toward daylight. They scrambled upward as outlaws shouted below. Halfway up, Nathan stopped and pointed to a pile of loose rock above the narrowest part. "Drop that and they can't follow." Elias looked. The boy was right. Together they pushed. Daniel helped with one shoulder. Lucy used both hands, her small face fierce with effort. The stones shifted, then roared down into the wash, sealing the path behind them in dust and thunder. For a few seconds, no one moved. Then Lucy began to laugh. It was not because anything was funny. It was the wild, broken laugh of someone whose body had run out of ways to hold fear. Daniel pulled her close. Elias sat on a rock and breathed through the pain. Below them, men cursed from the other side of the collapse, but they could not pass. The hidden wash led them out of Mercy Canyon by noon. At the top, the world opened wide, blue sky, dry grass, distant hills, and wind that did not smell of smoke or blood. Elias had never seen anything so beautiful. Later that afternoon, they circled back along the ridge and found the horses in the cottonwood pocket. Mercy had broken loose but had not gone far. She stood in the shade, chewing leaves as if she had arranged the entire rescue herself. Lucy hugged her neck. "You're ugly," she whispered. Mercy snorted. Elias smiled for the first time in days. It took them 2 more days to reach Bitter Creek. They arrived at dusk, 4 figures and a gray mare coming out of the desert like ghosts. The stable boy saw them first and dropped a bucket. Then the storekeeper came running. Then half the trading post poured into the street. Daniel Vale had been believed dead. Lucy had been believed lost. Elias Boone had not been believed at all, because no one who was left in Mercy Canyon without a horse was expected to return riding the same horse stolen from him. A posse formed before midnight. The sheriff from the next settlement took 6 men into the canyon at dawn. They found Cole, Varn, and Rusk at the first camp, still tied, thirsty, furious, and very much alive. Cole's remaining men were found near the collapsed wash, unable to find another way through. When they brought Cole back to Bitter Creek, his red scarf was gone, and his smile was gone with it. He looked at Elias from behind, tied hands, and said, "You should have died in that canyon." Elias stood beside Mercy, one hand on her neck. "So should a lot of people you left there." Cole was tried in Fort Laramie before winter, and hanged before the first snow. Rusk went to prison. The others scattered into sentences, cells, or graves. Nathan testified against them. Some wanted him punished like the rest. Others said his words saved future travelers. In the end, he served years, but not a lifetime. Elias heard much later that he became a blacksmith in a northern town and never carried a gun again. As for Daniel and Lucy, they went back to the Vale Ranch, though the place felt more like a wound than a home at first. Grief lived in the doorway. It sat at the supper table. It stood beside the cottonwood where Mrs. Vale was buried. But Daniel rebuilt because Lucy needed walls, and Lucy kept walking because her father needed to see that something had survived. Elias stayed to help mend fences, repair the barn, and bury the dead properly. He told himself he would leave after a week, then after a month, then after the first rain. Mercy liked the Vale pasture, and Elias discovered that sometimes a man's new life does not arrive with a trumpet or a sign. Sometimes it arrives as a broken fence, a quiet child, an old horse grazing in evening light, and a reason to wake before dawn. On the day he first meant to leave, Lucy handed him the small yellow scrap of cloth he had found in the canyon. "This was from my dress," she said. "I know. You kept it?" "I did. Then keep keeping it." Elias looked down at the cloth. "Why?" Lucy shrugged, but her eyes were serious. "So you remember the canyon wasn't empty." Elias folded it carefully and placed it inside his coat pocket. "I won't forget." Years passed and Mercy Canyon became a story again, because all dangerous places become stories when enough people survive them. Travelers still feared it, and they were right to fear it. Flash floods came without warning. Loose stone fell in the heat. Shadows could hide men, snakes, or thirst, but Elias and Daniel repaired the old line camp beneath the overhang. Every season they stocked it with dried beans, a water gourd, bandages, matches, and a blanket wrapped in oilcloth. Lucy carved words into a flat board above the hearth, for the one left behind. "Take what you need, leave what you can." No one signed it. No one needed to. More than once, a traveler came through Bitter Creek telling of a shelter in the canyon that had saved his life. A lost miner found water there. A mother and boy waited out a storm there. A wounded stage driver crawled inside after his team bolted and lived long enough to be found. Elias listened to those stories without saying much. He only touched the yellow cloth in his pocket and thought of the day Cole Varn took his horse and left him to die. He thought of Anna telling him to find his feet. He thought of Lucy raising a rusted knife though her own feet were bleeding. He thought of Daniel saying, "Take my girl." He thought of Nathan lowering his rifle, a small choice too late for innocence, but not too late for one good act. Most of all, he thought of Mercy, ugly and loyal, standing under cottonwood shade as if the whole canyon had always belonged to her. One autumn evening, when the air was cool and the canyon walls glowed red under the setting sun, Elias rode Mercy to the rim. The old mare was slower now. Her cloudy eye was cloudier. Her torn ear flicked at flies with less patience than before. Elias dismounted and stood beside her, looking down into the deep cuts and shadows of Mercy Canyon. From above, it almost looked peaceful. But he knew better. The canyon held death. It held cruelty. It held hunger, thirst, fear, and the laughter of men who mistook violence for strength. But it had held other things too. Hidden water beneath sand. A child who refused to disappear. A father who endured ropes and pain. A shelter behind stone. A road out where no road seemed possible. That was the truth of the frontier. It was harsh, but it was rarely empty. Every canyon had a memory. Every abandoned place had a purpose waiting to be found. Every shadow could hide danger, but sometimes, if a person kept moving, it could also hide salvation. The wind rose from below, warm and dry, carrying dust, old echoes, and the faint smell of cottonwood leaves. Mercy nudged Elias's shoulder. He patted her neck. "I know," he said. "Time to head home." The old mare turned without command, slow and steady beneath the darkening sky. Elias took one last look at the canyon, then followed. They had taken his horse, they had left him to die, but they had made one mistake. They thought the canyon was empty.